There's a hush that falls over Fangorn Forest when the ancient ones stir, a quiet so deep it feels like the very trees are holding their breath. Tonight, that silence is shattered. Far in the distance, the sharp, cruel sound of axes bites into the air, splitting bark and bone alike. And somewhere beneath the tangled roots and towering canopy, an old voice rumbles awake. Oakroot, eldest of the Ents, feels the pain of his home like a wound in his own flesh. The scent of burning wood drifts on the wind, mingling with the frightened cries of creatures fleeing deeper into the shadows. Can you hear it too? The forest is weeping, and Oakroot will not let it weep alone. Where are you listening from tonight, my friend? Is the moon high over your own quiet corner of the world, or perhaps just rising? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to wander this path with you, no matter the hour, because this isn't just a story about an ancient guardian and the trees he loves. It's about what happens when something sacred is threatened, when the balance of a world tilts toward ruin, and it's about the slow, earth-shaking wrath of those who have slept too long. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the weight of centuries in Oakroot's limbs, the way his roots dig deep into memories older than kingdoms. He's watched seasons turn and stars fade, but never has his heart been heavier than now. The forest doesn't just belong to him, it is him, and as the axes draw nearer, as the smoke thickens, something ancient begins to stir, not just anger, not just sorrow, but a promise whispered through the leaves. Fangorn will not fall without a fight. So settle in, traveler, tonight we walk with the Ents. Oakroot's footsteps sink deep into the moss, each heavy thud vibrating through the earth like a drumbeat of grief. The scent of freshly cut wood hangs thick in the air, bitter and wrong, and every broken sapling he passes feels like another wound. His fingers, gnarled and rough as the oldest oaks, brush against the jagged stumps left behind, tracing the violence done to his home. Then, through the trembling leaves, he hears them, the loggers. Their voices are loud, careless, shouting over the crackle of a fire built from fallen branches. They don't even notice the way the birds have gone silent, the way the wind itself seems to recoil from their presence. For a moment, Oakroot's anger burns so hot it threatens to split his bark. He could stride forward now, towering over them, shaking the ground with his rage. But something holds him back. These men are small, fleeting things compared to the ancient life of Fangorn. Would their fear even matter, or would it only bring more axes, more fire, in the days to come? The forest doesn't need vengeance, it needs protection, and Oakroot knows he cannot stand alone. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snaps, not under the weight of a boot, but something slower, deliberate. Another Ent, the thought kindles a fragile hope. If he can rouse the others from their long slumber, if he can make them feel the forest's pain as he does, perhaps Fangorn's voice will finally be heard. But time is slipping away like water through roots. With one last look at the laughing men, Oakroot turns, vanishing into the shadows. The hunt for his kin begins. The glade lies hidden beneath the oldest trees, where moonlight filters through the canopy in pale silver ribbons. Oakroot's call echoes through the roots and rivers, a sound too low for mortal ears, but unmistakable to his kin. One by one, they come, Ents who have slept for centuries, their bark thick with moss, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Elmthorn arrives first, his branches trembling with barely contained fury. Behind him, the gentle willow shade moves with the quiet grace of a flowing stream, while the towering beechfoot steps shake loose a shower of acorns. The debate begins slowly, as all things do among the Ents. Words stretch like roots through time, each syllable heavy with the weight of ages. Willowshade urges caution, her voice a whisper of wind through leaves. To act in anger is to become like those who harm us, she murmurs, but Elmthorn's reply cracks like a splitting branch. And to wait is to let them carve our home into kindling. The others stir, their creaking voices rising in a chorus of concern. Some speak of the long peace, of trees that will regrow in time. Others remember fires that left only scars where great groves once stood. Oakroot listens, feeling the divide like a fissure in the earth. He knows Elmthorn's rage, has felt it himself, but he also hears the fear beneath Willowshade's words. The forest cannot survive if its guardians are divided. When he finally speaks, his voice carries the deep resonance of a landslide, steady and inevitable. We are not just trees, he says. We are the memory of this land. If we forget our purpose, who will remind the world of its balance? A hush falls. Even Elmthorn's restless twitching stills. Oakroot reaches out, pressing his gnarled hand against the trunk of the eldest oak in the glade. Fangorn does not beg for mercy, he continues. It does not whisper for pity. It endures, and so must we, not as scattered voices, but as the storm that shakes the earth. One by one, the Ents place their hands upon the tree, their silent vow thrumming through the roots beneath them. The decision is made. The forest will answer, and the world will remember what it means to wake the wrath of the old ones. The ground trembles as Oakroot takes the first step, his massive roots tearing through the earth like ships, breaking anchor. Behind him, the gathered Ents move as one, a slow, inevitable tide of bark and fury. The forest holds its breath. Even the wind stills, as if nature itself is waiting to see what happens when the old ones finally wake. Every footfall sends vibrations through the soil, a message carried far beyond the glade. Fangorn is no longer sleeping. Elmthorn strides at Oakroot's side, his branches bristling like drawn swords. Let them hear us coming, he growls, and the trees shudder in agreement. Their path takes them past the scars left by the loggers. Raw stumps weeping sap, trampled ferns, the acrid stench of campfires built from stolen wood. Willowshade pauses, her delicate fingers brushing a young birch split, clean down the middle. A whisper passes between them, too soft for anyone but the forest to hear. Then she straightens, her sorrow hardening into something unbreakable. The deeper they go, the stranger the woods become. Vines slither from their path. Roots coil tighter around rocks, as if bracing for battle. Even the moonlight seems to gather ahead of them, pooling in eerie silver patches to light their way. It's as though Fangorn is guiding them, shaping the land to suit its purpose. Oakroot feels it in his core, the ancient magic of this place, awake and watching. A distant crash splits the night, not an axe this time, but the unmistakable sound of a tree falling. The Ents freeze. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, torches flicker like hungry eyes. Laughter floats on the air, careless and loud. Oakroot's grip tightens around a fallen limb, the wood groaning under his grasp. He doesn't need to look back to know his kin feel it too, the moment when patience runs dry. Elmthorn is the first to break the silence. Enough. The word cracks like lightning, and then, without another sound, the march begins in earnest. No more stealth. No more hesitation. The earth shakes with their steps, and the forest answers a chorus of creaking boughs and rustling leaves, 1,000 voices rising in unison. The invaders will hear them soon enough, and by then, it will be far too late to run. The mist curls around the Ents like a living thing, parting reluctantly as Oakroot takes his final step into the clearing. For a heartbeat, there's only silence, the loggers' faces frozen in the firelight, their axes slipping from numb fingers. Then the screaming starts. Men scramble backward, tripping over roots that seem to twist deliberately beneath their boots. Only one stands his ground, Harold, his knuckles white around the hilt of his hunting knife. The firelight dances in his wild eyes as he tilts his head up to meet Oakroot's gaze. Monsters, he spits, though his voice wavers. Trees with tricks and thunder voices. You don't frighten me. Oakroot's branches creak as he leans closer, his voice a low rumble that shakes pine needles from the canopy. You burn your own world to warm your hands, child of men, and you call us monsters. The words hang heavy in the air, thick with the scent of damp earth and sap. Behind him, Elmthorn's roots dig deep into the soil, tendrils spreading like cracks in glass. Willowshade's leaves tremble, not with fear, but with something far older. Disappointment. Harold's sneer falters. He glances at his men, now crouched like frightened hares in the underbrush, then back at the towering figures before him. For the first time, doubt flickers across his face, but pride is a hard thing to swallow. With a jagged cry, he lunges, blade flashing toward Oakroot's bark. The strike never lands. A vine whips from the shadows, coiling around Harold's wrist like a serpent, yanking him off balance. The forest itself seems to sigh as the knife thuds to the ground. No one moves. Even the fire holds its breath, flames shrinking to embers. Oakroot studies Harold not with anger now, but something closer to sorrow. You are small, he murmurs, and your fire smaller still. But the world remembers, it always remembers. Around him, the other Ents shift, their combined shadow swallowing the clearing whole. The message is clear. This is no battle. It's a warning, and the next time Fangorn wakes, there will be no words left to spare. A deafening crack splits the night as Elmthorn's roots erupt from the earth, flipping an empty wagon onto its side with a crash that sends sparks flying. The forest answers in kind, branches lash like whips, vines coil around axe handles, and the very ground seems to shift beneath the loggers' feet. Oakroot watches as men stumble backward, their faces pale with terror, and for a moment, he almost pities them. These are not warriors, just fools who never learn to listen to the world around them. Then Harold's voice cuts through the chaos, sharp with desperation. Burn it, he shouts, snatching a torch from the dying fire. Burn it all. The first flame catches on a pile of kindling, leaping hungrily toward the nearest tree. That's when something inside Oakroot snaps, not with rage, but with a sorrow so deep, it shakes his ancient bones. These men would rather reduce centuries of life to ash than admit defeat. Willowshade moves first. Her slender arms stretch impossibly long, dipping into the nearby stream like reeds bending to water. When she whips them forward, a wall of silver droplets smothers the fledgling fire with a hiss. The scent of wet charcoal fills the air. Harold gapes, his torch sputtering in disbelief, but the Ents don't give him time to think. Beach puts mighty swing, sends a fallen log rolling like a battering ram, scattering the remaining torches into the mud. Oakroot steps forward, his shadow swallowing Harold whole. "You were warned," he murmurs, and the words carry the weight of every fallen tree, every scorched acre. This time, when the roots surge upward, they don't stop at crushing wagons, they coil around ankles and wrists, pinning the men like insects in amber. Harold struggles, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but the vines only tighten gently, inexorably, not enough to break bone, just enough to remind him how small he is. The forest holds its breath. Somewhere overhead, an owl cries a lonely, echoing sound. Oakroot kneels, bringing his face level with Harold's. "Listen," he says, softer now. Beneath them, the earth thrums with a heartbeat older than cities. This is not your land to take, but it could be your land to know. For the first time, Harold's defiance wavers. His gaze flickers to the ruined camp, to his men trembling in the grip of living wood, then back to Oakroot's eyes, deep as tree rings, endless as roots. A gust of wind stirs the leaves, carrying the last traces of smoke away. The choice hangs in the air, fragile as a spider's thread. Run now and live with the memory. Or stay and learn what it means to hear the forest speak. Fire licks at the ancient oaks with a hunger no natural flame should possess, turning bark to blackened scars in seconds. The heat rolls off in waves, distorting the air like a fever dream, and for the first time in centuries, Oakroot feels something close to fear. Not for himself, his hide is thick as stone, but for the saplings trembling behind him, for the nests cupped in branches now curling to ash. His roar shakes the canopy, a sound so deep it rattles teeth and jaws, and the very leaves shiver in response. Then, water, not the gentle kiss of rain, but a deluge ripped from the riverbed by unseen hands. It crashes down like 1,000 silver spears, hissing as it meets the flames. The loggers stagger back, their torches dying mid-swing, their shouts drowned by the sudden roar of the storm. Steam rises in great ghostly pillars, wrapping the clearing in a veil of mist. For a heartbeat, all is chaos, men slipping in mud, axes abandoned, their precious fire reduced to sputtering embers. But Oakroot doesn't watch them flee. His gaze is fixed on the scorched earth, on the sapling that somehow still stands at the clearing's edge, its leaves curled tight, its slender trunk blackened but unbroken. He reaches out, cradling it in his palm, and the tree shivers as if whispering its thanks. This is what they nearly lost. Not just wood, not just shade, but a life that had barely begun to reach for the sun. The river's voice murmurs through the roots beneath him, a cool thread of gratitude woven into the soil. It had answered his call, yes, but the cost lingers in the air like ozone after lightning. The loggers will return. They always do. And next time, they'll come with more than axes. They'll come with the bitter resolve of those who have been humiliated. Oakroot knows the scent of war. It smells like damp charcoal and crushed green shoots. Elmthorn's shadow falls beside him, his branches still dripping. They'll burn the whole forest to spite us, he growls. Willowshade says nothing, but her roots twine tighter around the wounded sapling, her leaves shedding droplets like silent tears. The quiet between them is heavier than any words. Fangorn has slept too long. and now its waking will be written in scars. Somewhere beyond the trees, a branch cracks underfoot, too deliberate to be an animal. Oakroot's head snaps up. The loggers may have fled, but the forest is never truly empty. Something else moves in the shadows tonight. Something old enough to remember the last time the trees went to war. A whimper cuts through the stillness, small, broken, the sound of a creature pushed beyond endurance. Oakroot turns just as the fox collapses at the edge of the glade, its russet fur matted with dirt and something darker. Blood drips from a gash along its flank, each drop sinking into the moss like a terrible secret. Willowshade is there in an instant, her leaves brushing the animal's heaving side, but the fox doesn't flinch. Its golden eyes lock onto Oakroot's, wide with a fear that has nothing to do with pain. They came from the east. The fox rasps, its voice barely more than a rustle of dry leaves. Men with iron beasts that chew through trees like grass. They left scars in the earth so deep, the roots screamed. A shudder passes through its body, and for a heartbeat, the only sound is the distant creak of branches, until the fox whispers the worst of it. The loggers you drove out, they were nothing, just claws before the teeth. Oakroot feels the words like a blow to his trunk. The glade around him seems to tilt, the very air thickening with dread. Machines. He's heard tales of them, of course. Smoke-belching horrors from the world beyond Fangorn, where men bend nature to their will with gears and fire. But never here, never in the heart of the forest. Elmthorn's bark cracks as his fists clench. How many, he demands, his voice like splintering wood. The fox's ears flatten, more than the stars in a clearing sky. Its gaze flickers toward the horizon, where the first pale hints of dawn stain the treetops. They bring fire that doesn't sleep, and they march at sunrise. Silence, even the wind holds its breath. Oakroot looks down at his own hands, the gnarled fingers that have coaxed saplings from soil and gentled storms for centuries. What good are roots against iron? What good is patience against hunger that never ends? The doubt is a cold stone in his chest, until Willowshade's voice, soft as a bud unfurling, breaks through. Fangorn has stood since the mountains were young, she murmurs. It does not fall so easily. Something in her words stirs the old memories sleeping in Oakroot's bark. The forest has faced darkness before, the great blight that blackened the southern woods, the drought that turned rivers to dust. Each time, Fangorn found a way to endure. Not by meeting force with force, but by being what it has always been, relentless, patient, alive in ways men with their machines could never fathom. A plan begins to take root, slow but sure as the turning of seasons. Oakroot straightens, his branches casting long shadows across the glade. Gather the Huorns, he tells Elmthorn. The ancient, half-sentient trees rarely wake, but when they do, even the earth trembles. Beechfoot lets out a low groan of understanding. His kin near the eastern thickets are old enough to remember the last time the forest walked to war. The fox tries to rise, its legs trembling, but Oakroot gently presses a hand to its back. Rest, he says. You've carried your warning well. As Willowshade tends to its wounds, Oakroot turns his face to the wind, breathing in the scent of damp soil and distant smoke. The machines may come with their fire and teeth, but they've forgotten one thing. The forest has had centuries to learn how to fight back, and dawn, has never been kind to those who mistake silence for surrender. The path to Lothlorien is longer than Oakroot remembers. The air grows thinner as the mountains rise around him, their peaks gleaming like teeth against the twilight. Even his ancient limbs ache with the effort, but the image of those iron beasts gnawing at the edges of Fangorn drives him onward. When the golden leaves of the elven realm finally shimmer into view, they're not the welcoming canopy he'd hoped for. The Malorn trees stand tall, yes, but their usual radiance is dimmed, their boughs heavy with unspoken tension. Galadriel meets him at the bridge, her presence both serene and sorrowful. She doesn't need to speak for Oakroot to feel the weight pressing upon her. The same shadow that haunts Fangorn stretches here, too. "You come seeking swords," she says, her voice like wind through silver grass. It's not a question. Oakroot's branches sag slightly. He'd expected resistance, but not the quiet exhaustion in her eyes. The council gathers beneath the flickering lanterns of Karaz Galadhen, their faces etched with the same grim understanding. Celeborn's fingers tighten around his goblet as Oakroot speaks of the machines, of roots torn screaming from the earth. "We've seen their work in the south," an elf murmurs, tracing a map with a fingertip. They cut faster than regrowth can follow. The others exchange glances, and Oakroot knows before they say it. Lothlorien's warriors are already stretched thin, guarding their own borders against the creeping darkness. Yet when Galadriel rises, her gaze pierces through the despair like moonlight through fog. "We cannot give you blades," she admits, "but we can give you memory." She presses a hand to Oakroot's bark, and for a heartbeat, he feels it, an echo of the oldest songs, the ones sung when the world was young. The trees remember what men have forgotten. Awaken the shepherds of Fangorn, Oakroot, the ones who walked before even your time. The name sends a shiver through his roots. The Anadram, the first tree herds, who shaped the forests with whispers and will. Most sleep now, buried so deep even the Ents rarely speak of them. But if they could be roused, to Oakroot's breath leaves him in a slow creak of understanding. The elves cannot fight this war for him, but they've handed him something far more dangerous: hope. As he turns to leave, Celeborn stops him with a touch. "One more thing," he says, offering a slender vial. "Water from the mirror of Galadriel, where the old ones slumber. Even your voice may not reach, but this carries the weight of all that was." The liquid inside swirls with starlight, alive in a way no ordinary water could be. Oakroot tucks it into the hollow of his trunk, the cool glass a silent promise against his heart. The journey back is quieter. The stars wheel overhead, and the wind carries snippets of elvish songs, half remembered and bittersweet. Oakroot wonders if the Anadram will even recognize this changed world, or if they'll wake only to rage against it. But as Fangorn's shadow rises before him, dark and steadfast against the horizon, he knows there's no other choice. The forest's oldest children must rise. And if they do, let the machines tremble. The ground beneath Fangorn hums like a plucked string as Oakroot's voice sinks into the soil, each syllable a tremor traveling deeper than any root has ever reached. Moonlight pools in the hollows of his bark, silvering the scars left by axes and fire, but his song is older than wounds, older than sorrow. It's a language the first trees whispered when the world was young, a sound that doesn't just travel through the air, but through time. And somewhere in the dark, something answers, A crack splits the silence, sharp as a falling oak. Then another. The earth heaves upward, shedding centuries of moss and leaf litter as gnarled fingers claw free from the dirt. The Anadram rise slowly, their bodies massive as hillocks, their bark blackened by ages of sleep. Their eyes ignite one by one, not the gentle glow of Ents, but a searing, molten gold that scorches the shadows around them. The air thickens with the scent of resin and something sharper, like lightning about to strike. Willowshade takes an involuntary step back, her leaves shivering. These are not the tree herds of songs and stories. These are the survivors of the first burning, the ones who remember when forests stretched unbroken from mountain to sea. And their gaze, when it lands on Oakroot, holds no recognition, only a rage that makes the very air tremble. Elmthorn grips a fallen branch like a weapon, though his voice wavers. They don't know us. The realization hangs heavy. The Anadram were asleep before the Ents were born. To them, Fangorn's guardians might as well be saplings swaying in their way. Oakroot doesn't flinch. He steps forward, the vial from Lothlorien glinting in his palm, and pours its contents onto the roots of the nearest Anad. The water doesn't soak in. It sings, spiraling up the ancient bark in ribbons of starlight, carrying with it the memories of every sunrise Fangorn has ever seen. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the Anad's head tilts, its glowing eyes narrowing not in anger now, but something closer to curiosity. The starlight spreads, threading through the cracks in its bark like veins of liquid memory. It remembers the shaping of valleys by its roots, the taste of clean rain, the weight of nests cradled in its branches, and deeper still, the shadow that came with smoke and blades, the reason it buried itself so long ago. The others stir, drawn by the light, their growls softening into murmurs as the water's song reaches them. But Oakroot feels the tension coiled in their limbs, the way their roots dig into the earth like fists. They remember, yes, but memory alone won't stay their wrath, not when the scent of burning still drifts on the wind. The oldest among them, a being whose trunk is carved with runes even the elves have forgotten, speaks a single word that shakes the leaves from the trees. Where? And Oakroot, with the weight of Fangorn's pain in his voice, tells them. The earth splits apart beneath the Anadram's steps, each footfall sending shock waves through the soil that topple saplings and send birds scattering into the twilight. Oakroot walks among them, his usual steady gait unsteady now, like a sapling caught in a gale. The ancient ones do not march, they surge, their roots tearing ravines where there were once deer trails, their branches scraping the clouds. Their anger is a living thing, thick as pollen in the air, and it coats Oakroot's tongue like ash. He'd hoped for allies. What stirs beside him now feels more like wildfire given flesh. Elmthorn keeps pace at his side, though even his usual fierceness is muted. They'll trample Fangorn before they reach the machines. He mutters, ducking as a low-hanging branch snaps overhead. Oakroot doesn't answer. He's too busy counting the cracks in the earth, the way the oldest oaks groan as the Anadram pass. The forest is strong, yes, but it was never meant to bear the weight of its own ancestors. Then the wind shifts, and with it comes a sound that turns Oakroot's roots to ice, a metallic shriek, like 1,000 axes grinding against stone, the machines. They crest the far ridge like a pack of steel wolves, their smokestacks belching black clouds that stain the sunset. Even from this distance, Oakroot can see their jaws, spinning teeth of iron, hungry for bark and bone alike. The Anadram go utterly still. For a heartbeat, the only sound is the distant thud-thud, thud of the machine's monstrous tread. Then the eldest Anad, the one whose bark is carved with forgotten runes, lifts its face to the sky and roars. The sound is nothing like the creaking speech of Ents. It's the scream of a mountain splitting in two. The very air shakes. Oakroot staggers, his branches clattering like dry bones as the Anadram charge. What happens next is beyond anything Oakroot could have imagined. The machines don't stand a chance. The first Anad reaches them in 3 strides, its roots coiling around the nearest contraption like serpents. Metal groans, then buckles, then snaps with a sound that echoes across the valley. The others follow, their massive hands crushing smokestacks, their roots upending treads as easily as flipping stones in a stream. For a moment, Oakroot dares to hope, but the forest is burning. A stray spark from a toppled machine catches the dry underbrush, and flames leap up with terrifying speed. The Anadram don't notice. They're too lost in their vengeance, too consumed by the joy of feeling their enemies break beneath them. Oakroot watches in horror as the fire spreads, licking at the hem of Willowshade's leaves, creeping toward the dens where the foxes and badgers have hidden their young. He turns to Elmthorn, his voice raw. "We came to save Fangorn," he says, "not bury it." The words hang between them, heavy as a falling tree. Somewhere in the smoke, a sapling screams. And Oakroot realizes, with a sorrow deeper than roots, that the oldest lesson of the forest is also the cruelest. Even wrath born of love can be a kind of poison. The air tastes of iron and scorched sap as Oakroot wrenches another siege engine from the earth, its twisted gears shrieking like wounded animals. Around him, Fangorn convulses. Branches lash at the remaining machines. Roots coil around screaming men, and the Anadram's thunderous steps shake loose avalanches of dead leaves. But where the ancient tree spirits roar with the fury of 1,000 storms, Oakroot moves in silence. His every motion is measured, deliberate, as he lifts a fallen maple to safety, or blocks a spray of flaming pitch with his own gnarled limbs. There's no hatred in his strike, only the bone-deep ache of a guardian who has failed. A sob cuts through the din. Oakroot turns to see a young logger, barely more than a sapling himself, trapped beneath a splintered beam, his leg bent at a brutal angle. The boy's eyes lock onto Oakroot's, wide with a terror that has nothing to do with pain. Behind them, an Anad looms, its bark seething with embers, its massive foot raised to crush them both. Time slows, the boy whimpers, and Oakroot does the only thing he can. He steps between them. The impact rattles his trunk to the core. The Anad's foot grinds against his shoulder, sending cracks spiderwebbing through his bark, but Oakroot holds firm. "Enough," he gasps, the word barely audible over the chaos. The ancient spirit pauses, its molten gaze flickering from the cowering boy to Oakroot's splintered wood. For a heartbeat, the battlefield itself seems to hold its breath. Then, from the smoke, Willowshade emerges, her leaves dripping with river water. She doesn't speak. She simply lays a hand on the Anad's roots, and the memory flows between them not of fire and axes, but of acorns cradled in soft soil, of saplings stretching toward their first sunrise. The Anad trembles, its ember-bright eyes dim just slightly as it steps back, but the lesson comes too late for the others. Across the clearing, Elmthorn watches as another tree spirit flips a wagon, sending men scrambling like beetles under a lifted stone. There's no mercy in the act, no purpose beyond destruction. The line between justice and vengeance has vanished, swallowed by the same smoke that chokes the morning sky. Oakroot staggers toward Elmthorn, his roots dragging through the bloodied earth. We wanted to save Fangorn, he rasps, not become its executioners. The younger Ents' branches twitch, his rage still simmering, but something in Oakroot's broken posture gives him pause. Together, they turn to face the remnants of the battle. The shattered machines, the fleeing loggers, the Anadram standing knee-deep in the wreckage of their own wrath. The forest has won, but as the first flames lick at the elder oaks on the ridge, Oakroot wonders if victory always tastes this much like ashes. Harold's breath comes in ragged gasps, his fingers clawing at the dirt as the weight of the fallen oak presses down on his legs. Blood streaks his forehead, mingling with sweat and soot, and for the first time since Oakroot met him, there's no sneer twisting his lips, only raw animal fear. The battle rages around them, the Anadram's thunderous steps, shaking the earth, but in this small pocket of chaos, time stretches thin as a spider's thread. Oakroot stands frozen, his roots digging into the soil like clenched fists. Every splintered branch, every scorched leaf whispers for justice. This man brought the axes. The fire, the machines that gnaw at Fangorn's bones. How many saplings wept as they fell beneath his blade. How many creatures fled their nests because of his pride. The forest's pain throbs in Oakroot's chest, a living thing begging for retribution. Yet the whimper that escapes Harold's lips is unmistakably human. Not the cry of a conqueror, but of a boy who's just realized he's mortal. His eyes wide and glassy with panic find Oakroot's, and in them, the Ent sees something that makes his bark prickle, his own reflection. Not as a monster, not as an enemy, but as the only thing standing between Harold and the crushing dark. Willowshade's voice brushes against his mind, like a breeze through leaves. To save a life is not to forgive the harm, she murmurs, but it is to remember what grows in the space between vengeance and mercy. The fallen oak groans, its trunk inching lower. Harold's breath hitches, his fingers scrambling for purchase. Something in Oakroot's ancient heart splinters. With a roar that shakes the moss from the trees, he lunges forward, his gnarled hands sliding beneath the oak's weight. Wood screams against wood as he heaves, his roots tearing through the soil like anchors loosed from stone. For one impossible moment, the world holds its breath. Then the oak rolls aside with a crash that sends up a plume of damp earth. Harold doesn't move. He stares up at Oakroot, his chest heaving, his face streaked with dirt and disbelief. The silence between them is thicker than fog. No words past none are needed. The choice has been made, and as Oakroot turns back to the burning forest, his steps heavy with the weight of what he's done, he realizes the true cost of this war isn't measured in fallen trees or broken machines. It's in the quiet, terrible moment when you must decide what kind of guardian you are, and whether the soul of Fangorn is something you defend with wrath, or something you prove with grace. The Anadram's roar shakes the last leaves from the scorched oaks, their voices blending into a single, terrible question. Why? Elmthorn steps forward, his branches quivering with barely contained fury. He deserved to burn, he snarls, gesturing to Harold's retreating figure. His kind plant nothing but graves, The other Ents shift uneasily, their roots stirring the ash-strewn earth. Even Willowshade's gentle gaze holds no pity, only a quiet sorrow, as if she's already mourning the choice Oakroot has made. But Oakroot doesn't flinch. He turns to face the gathered tree spirits, his bark still smoldering where the fire licked too close. And if we crush every man who lifts an axe, he rumbles, who will be left to plant the seeds? The words hang in the smoky air, heavier than the weight of the oak he lifted. For a heartbeat, the battlefield falls silent. Somewhere beyond the wreckage, a lone bird trills a fragile sound, almost lost beneath the groans of dying machines. The eldest Anad strides forward, its roots churning the soil like a river in flood. When it speaks, the ground itself shudders. Mercy is a sapling's weakness. It growls, ember-bright eyes boring into oak roots. We remember the first burning. The scars never faded. Its massive hand drifts to the jagged fissure in its trunk, where ancient axe marks still weep resin. The memory is a living thing between them, thick as the smoke coiling overhead. Oakroot reaches out, pressing his palm to the Anad's wound. "I remember too," he murmurs. But if we answer every wound with another, when does the bleeding stop? His fingers trace the gnarled edges of the scar, feeling the echo of old pain. The Anad stiffens, then impossibly, its breath leaves it in a slow, creaking sigh. The fire in its eyes dims, just slightly. A gust of wind scatters the ashes at their feet, revealing a single green shoot pushing through the charred earth. Willowshade kneels, her leaves trembling as they brush the tiny sprout. No one speaks. The truth is too simple, too quiet to voice aloud. Wars end when someone chooses to kneel for an enemy's sapling instead of crushing it. Elmthorn is the first to turn away, his branches drooping. "They'll come back," he mutters, but the venom has drained from his voice. Oakroot watches the horizon, where Harold's silhouette stumbles toward the distant glow of man-made fires. "Maybe," he says, "but next time they'll remember this." The Anadram shift, their roots sinking deeper into the soil, not in rage now, but something closer to resignation. The oldest among them lifts its face to the wind, as if testing the scent of the future, and for the first time since the battle began, the forest breathes. The last of the loggers vanish into the mist, their shouts fading like the echoes of a felled tree. Some stumble over roots that seem to twist deliberately beneath their boots. Others drop their axes without a backward glance, the metal swallowed by hungry moss before it even hits the ground. The great machines, once roaring beasts of iron, now lie motionless, their jagged edges already veiled by creeping ivy, their smokestacks choked with tendrils of flowering vine. Fangorn reclaims what was taken, but the forest's triumph is a quiet, wounded thing. Oakroot runs his fingers along the charred trunk of an elder oak, the bark crumbling like burnt parchment under his touch. The air still stings with the ghost of smoke, and the earth beneath his feet is unnaturally warm, as if the ground itself remembers the fire's teeth. Nearby, Willowshade kneels beside a sapling split, clean down the middle by a stray axe. Her leaves tremble as she cups the broken halves, willing them to knit together, but some wounds run too deep for even an Ent's touch to mend. Elmthorn kicks at the carcass of a fallen machine, his bark streaked with soot. "They'll return," he mutters, voice thick with the certainty of centuries. Men always do. The words hang heavy because they both know he's right. Fear may scatter them today, But greed has a way of gnawing through memory. And greed never sleeps. A rustle stirs the undergrowth, not the wind, but something smaller, softer. A fox emerges, its fur streaked with ash, one ear torn where a branch grazed it. It doesn't flinch at the sight of the Ents. Instead, it pads forward, pressing its muzzle against Oakroot's roots in silent thanks, before vanishing into the shadows. The gesture is fleeting, but it lingers in Oakroot's chest like sunlight through leaves. This is what they fought for, not just the towering oaks or the ancient glades, but the quiet pulse of life between them. The foxes and finches, the ferns and fungi, the thousand unspoken bonds that make a forest more than just trees. The Anadram gather at the ridge, their silhouettes black against the dawn. They don't speak. They don't need to. Their eyes glow like banked embers, watching the horizon where the last of the invaders disappeared. They've done what they came to do, but as the eldest turns away, its roots dragging deep furrows in the soil, Oakroot feels the unasked question like a splinter in his heart. When the next fire comes, who will stand in the gap? Willowshade's voice is barely a whisper. "We plant," she says, lifting a single acorn from the scorched earth. It's cracked, but alive, its pale root already seeking the soil. Elmthorn scoffs, but his hands are gentler than his words as he takes it from her, pressing it into a patch of unburned moss. The gesture is small, foolish, maybe. But as the first drops of rain begin to fall, washing the ash from the leaves, softening the wounds in the earth, Oakroot thinks of the oldest lesson Fangorn ever taught him. Forests don't grow in spite of darkness. They grow through it, one stubborn inch at a time. The song begins as a whisper, so faint even the wind hesitates to carry it. Oakroot's voice doesn't rise like it did to wake the Anadram. It sinks, seeping into the soil like rain after a long drought. The notes are older than anger, older than war, plucked from the time before men carved their first marks into bark. They hum through the roots, through the charred earth, wrapping around the ancient spirits like vines, coaxing a storm to stillness. At first, nothing changes. The Anadram stand like mountains given breath, their ember eyes fixed on the horizon where the last of the invaders fled. But then slowly, so slowly, the eldest blinks. Its massive head tilts, as if listening to something far beneath the noise of the world. The song isn't just in Oakroot's throat now. It's in the way Willowshade's leaves brush the scars on their bark, in the way Elmthorn presses his palm to the earth, offering his own quiet harmony. Even the wounded fox limps closer, its ears twitching at a melody it doesn't understand but knows, deep in its bones. The change is subtle as a season turning. The Anadram's shoulders slump, their roots loosening from the torn soil. One by one, their glowing eyes dim from wildfire gold to the soft amber of late autumn sunlight. The eldest sighs, a sound like boulders settling after an avalanche, and turns toward the heart of the forest. It doesn't speak. It doesn't need to. The others follow, their steps heavy with the weight of centuries, until the last of them vanishes into the mist between the oldest trees. Silence settles over Fangorn, but it's a different kind of quiet than before. Not the stillness of sleep, but the hush of a wound beginning to knit. Oakroot's song fades, though the forest carries it now. In the creak of branches, the rustle of ferns, the distant chuckle of a stream, finding its way around newly fallen stones. The Ents gather in the clearing, their bark streaked with soot and sap, their roots tangled together like clasped hands. No one speaks. Words would shatter the fragile peace humming in the air. But as the first star pierces the twilight, Willowshade lifts a single acorn from the ashes and presses it into the earth. A promise, not a victory, because the forest remembers. And so must they. The stars blink cold and distant through the canopy, their light too faint to touch the scorched earth where Oakroot kneels. His fingers trace the outline of a fallen sapling, its trunk snapped clean by a careless boot, its leaves already crumbling to dust. The names of the lost whisper through his mind, like wind through bare branches. The great oak that once cradled generations of owls, the willow whose roots drank deep from the hidden spring, the young birch that had only just begun to stretch toward the sky. Their absence is a hollow ache, a space where songbirds should nest and squirrels should leap, but the earth beneath his palms still thrums with life. Tiny shoots press upward through the ash, their pale stems trembling but unbroken. Somewhere beyond the burnt glade, a nightingale tests its voice, a single note, fragile as a dewdrop, but unmistakably alive. Oakroot closes his eyes and lets the sound wash over him. The forest is wounded, yes, but not defeated. He thinks of Harold stumbling into the mist, the boy's face streaked with soot and something darker. Shame, perhaps, or the first flicker of understanding. Men have short memories when it comes to trees, but terror lingers. The stories they'll tell tonight by their fires, of walking mountains and roots that move like serpents, might stay hands that would have once reached for axes. And stories, Oakroot knows, have roots deeper than iron. A rustle breaks the stillness. Elmthorn looms over him, his bark still smudged with battle. "You're brooding," he grunts, tossing a handful of acorns onto the scorched earth between them. The gesture is rough, but the offering is clear. Grief is not a seedbed. Willowshade joins them, her leaves shedding droplets of moonlight as she kneels to press a sprig of healing yarrow against Oakroot's cracked bark. No words pass between them, none are needed. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of damp soil and distant rain. Somewhere in the dark, a fox kits, born after the fires, knowing nothing of axes or men, chases moths through the ferns. Oakroot exhales, slow and deep, feeling the weight of centuries settle differently on his branches tonight. Not lighter, exactly, but wiser. The forest doesn't keep tally of battles won or lost. It measures time in rings and seasons, in the stubborn green that always finds a way. And as the first drops of rain begin to fall, washing the ashes into the earth where new roots will drink them, Oakroot lifts his face to the sky and lets the water fill the cracks in his bark. The storm will pass, the sun will rise, and Fangorn will remember, not just the wounds, but the hands that tended them. Dawn spills like liquid gold over the ravaged glade, painting the scorched trunks in hues of amber and rust. The first birdsong rises, a single thrush perched on the splintered remains of an elder oak, its melody trembling but unbroken. Oakroot feels the vibration of it through his roots, a fragile thread stitching the silence back together. The air smells of damp earth and healing, the last tendrils of smoke dissolving into the morning mist. He stretches his branches toward the light, his bark still cracked from the battle, but his heartwood steady. The forest breathes differently now. The wind carries whispers of both loss and renewal, burnt ferns, giving way to fiddleheads unfurling, the crisp scent of new pine needles piercing through the char. Willowshade kneels nearby, her fingers tracing the edges of a fox's paw print, pressed into the soft mud beside the stream. The creature had returned in the night, its den spared by some miracle of terrain, or chance. A small victory, but victories no longer feel small to Oakroot, not when every sprout pushing through the ash is a rebellion. Elmthorn stands at the ridge, his silhouette sharp against the brightening sky. He doesn't speak, but his stillness speaks for him, the tension in his roots, the way his leaves twitch at every distant sound. Some wounds don't close with daylight. Oakroot knows this. He remembers the centuries after the first burning, how the oldest trees bore their scars like silent warnings. But he also remembers the saplings that grew in their shadows, their roots fed by what was lost. A rustle stirs the undergrowth, not a threat, but a badger, its striped face peering from a thicket, eyes reflecting the dawn. It sniffs the air, then lumbers forward, unafraid, to nudge a fallen acorn toward Oakroot's foot. The gesture is so deliberate, it steals his breath. For a heartbeat, the Ent forgets the weight on his branches. This is why they fought, not for vengeance, not for dominion, but for the quiet moments when the forest remembers how to trust. The sun climbs higher, and with it, the chorus of life swells. Crickets in the meadow, frogs by the stream, the distant knock of a woodpecker drilling into blighted bark to reach the grubs beneath. Even the broken places hum with purpose now. Oakroot closes his eyes, listening to the rhythm of it all. The shadows will return, men with their axes and fire, their hunger blind as roots in the dark. But so will the Ents, and the Anadram, though they sleep again, have left their mark not just on the earth, but on the stories men will tell. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of blooming elderflower from a surviving thicket. Somewhere deep in Fangorn, a sapling he's never met stretches its first true leaves toward the light. Oakroot smiles, slow as growing things do. The forest is not the same. It never is, but it endures, and so will he.